Hi everyone, I'm Marcus Foss from AXO, and today I'm going to tell you what effort estimation methods are available and what are the best practices in this area. We remember, effort estimation is the sub-process of project planning in which the effort for the implementation of this scope is determined on the basis of the known or assumed scope. Under certain circumstances, or depending on the specific method, other characteristics of the project or information from the context are also included here, as well as information about the team that will carry out the project, insofar as this is already known at the time of the estimate. Otherwise, the estimate must be made with prototypical teams or assumptions about the available skills. Effort estimation methods in this sense can now be divided into three main method classes. First, there are the explicit estimation methods, also known as expert estimation or bottom-up methods. On the other hand, implicit estimation methods play an essential role, especially in the area of agile PM methods. These are also known as relative or top-down estimation methods. And finally, there are analogy estimations. This is perhaps the loosest or lightest type of estimation. In an analogy estimation, the effort of the entire project is estimated without going into details, simply on the basis of a comparison with known projects that have already been carried out. According to the motto, my project X to be estimated is about 1.5 times more time-consuming than project Y, which we carried out last year. We needed 1,000 person days there, so now it will probably be 1,500 person days. You can see just a very rough estimate, with a view to the different types of contracts. See also the corresponding video. An analogy estimation is perhaps sufficient for a contract of lowest project risk class, that is, no work but pure service. Billing not at a fixed price but according to effort, with no fixed but with a flexible scope. For the projects of higher risk classes, the implicit or even the explicit estimation methods are needed. These bring higher security into the estimation but also entail a higher effort. More about this now. Let's start with the explicit methods. Here, a parts list is created of all the operational and cross-cutting activities or work packages required to implement the scope. This corresponds either directly to the requirements in the form of epics, features, stories, etc., and the work package in the parts list is then to implement requirement A, for example. Just as well, the work packages of the parts list can also break down the implementation into subtasks, for example, activities such as specification of feature F, realization of component C, testing of use case U, or also project management activity P. For each element of this parts list, the effort is then estimated explicitly, that is directly in person, days, weeks, or months by one or more experts. In comparison, the implicit methods function in such a way that first of all it must be determined with which measure of size the technical complexity of a requirement or a work package for its implementation is to be recorded at all. Depending on the concrete method, this can also be directly person days, weeks, or months. In this point, the method is not yet implicit. However, it is common, especially in the agile project world, to work with complexity points that are assigned to the requirements. The best known are story points for stories, but sometimes epic points are also used for entire epics. The idea of assigning complexity points also underlies the use case point, which, as the name suggests, is based on entire use cases for defining the requirements or the scope. This method is actually very interesting and potentially also very efficient, but it is not really widespread. The approach to grasp complexity over points is actually already older. Before the object-oriented methods became established, people often worked with function points, that is, points were assigned to the functions to be implemented. And also in methods such as COCOMO, the constructive cost model by Barry Bem, there was already the size measure of the delivered source code instructions, DSI for short, as an improvement of the approach of simply measuring the lines of code. The last two measures, function points and DSI, however, no longer play a role today. We see implicit methods are called implicit on the one hand because they mostly work with the abstraction of complexity points instead of explicit efforts. On the other hand, these are also called implicit because they additionally define size classes for classifying the requirements to be implemented. A typical example are the well-known t-shirt sizes S, M, L, XL, etc. Thus, only a few reference requirements for the content definition of the size classes are now explicitly estimated. All other requirements are only compared with the references and sorted directly into the respective size classes. This means, for example, that a size class statement such as a story of t-shirt size M corresponds to 5 story points is implicitly transferred to each story that is assigned to this class M, Depending on the project or contract type, it is either sufficient to operate exclusively with the complexity points, or there must also be a mapping to the actual effort, that is, the person days, weeks, or months for the complexity points. Accordingly, the current productivity or velocity of the project or team can be expressed either in the points world, for example in points per sprint, or in the people days world, for example in person days per point. You can also find more on this topic in the video Effective Estimation Methods. In the following, I will only discuss best practices here, and best practices regardless of the specific estimation method. The first of these is to have only real experts estimate. A sufficiently accurate estimate of effort is the basis for many decisions to be derived from it. Only on the basis of realistic efforts can further planning and control of the project be carried out realistically. An unrealistic plan based on unrealistic effort estimates always leads indirectly to higher actual effort in the project than would actually be necessary, and thus to inefficiency. Therefore, the people who understand the most about it should always do the estimation, and often these are the people who later implement the project, that is, the developers or architects, and not the commercially responsible managers. And then, very important, don't talk down the effort. Efforts estimated by experts are not talked down. This is not about questioning the content of estimated efforts, for example, with the question of whether the solution is the simplest possible. However, it is often the case that the commercially responsible management in particular does not like the amount of the estimated effort because it fears for the competitiveness of the offers that are to be prepared on this basis. However, this must never mean that I start to question the efforts estimated by the experts. Instead, separate pricing and estimation. Commercially responsible parties may not talk down the effort, but they can, if they believe this is necessary for competitiveness, offer to implement the estimated effort at a lower price. This is then a targeted investment. Sometimes this is also called fighting price. The only important thing is not to mix effort estimation and pricing, and to plan and manage the project on the basis of realistic, non-manipulated effort. Consider context and team. The project team, and also the technical and organizational project context, have a decisive impact on the project effort to be assumed. We have already explained a great deal about this in the video on influencing factors. It is ideal if both are already taken into account in the estimation. That is, it is important that I find out as much as possible about them before the estimation. Categorize efforts. It has proven useful to categorize project efforts. At the first level, this is the distinction between operational and cross-cutting activities. On the second level, examples of operational categories are in particular the core processes, that is analysis and specification, architecture and design, implementation, integration and testing, commissioning, etc. For cross-cutting activities, these are, for example, project or quality management, but also induction or travel times. Categorizing efforts in this way has many advantages. For expert estimates, categorization refines the effort consideration along the parts list. This makes it less likely that efforts will be overlooked. This is especially and repeatedly true for the various cross-cutting issues. If the project context is similar, the distribution of the total effort among the categories is also similar. This makes it possible to additionally plausibilize efforts. And the actual time recording along the effort categories also enables more accurate controlling. There is a separate video on effort estimation with effort categories. And finally, evaluate the design to cost approach. If an offer is to be prepared on the basis of the effort estimate, it is not uncommon to also know the costs up to which the offer is attractive for the customer and thus promising for the offerer. As already mentioned, the effort required for a given scope should not be minimized. In this case, however, it should always be carefully considered which cuts could be made to explicitly or implicitly expressed requirements in order not to exceed the costs. This also applies to ongoing projects. See also the video on scope management. If necessary, it is most promising to then offer exactly the same. That is, with well-explained cutbacks in the offer. And in the next video, I'll tell you how capacity planning works. Until then.